Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we have the opportunity to work on an oldie but a goodie from our power tool manufacturer Ryobi. This is the Sliver Cloud SX4N, found it at a parts bin at a local fisherman's flea market. And you know what? It works. It's just hard to kind of break the bail and the like. And that's because the thing's been sitting for as long as it is. Everything I feel about this reel tells me that, well, it just needs a good tune-up and some oil, and this thing should be working fine. Let's start with that bail. A lot of times when these things sit, dirt and everything accumulates in that bail lever there. The other side's a dead end here. You don't need to worry about that too much. But if you just kind of loosen that up with some penetrating oil, generally, well, you fix the issue without doing much at all. Look at that. Just right away, and it's snapping away, and with more use, it'll snap away even further. Very tight reel, which means, well, we probably have a lot of dried grease in there. So let's go ahead and take this reel apart. We'll show you how it's made, show you how to service it if you have one of these, and, well, get it back out there fishing again, give it a second chance. I'm going to start by taking off the exterior pieces, and I'm going to start with the handle. And when I'm doing that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button. That will let you know when I'm posting videos. I try to post every day. And, well, I work on all kinds of reels. You'll be able to see which ones I'm working on, and you can make a determination as to whether that's a video that you want to watch. Well, this is an interesting one. This handle is called the One Touch. I'm going to spray this down too. I'll show you how to work it. It was very tight when I was kind of working on it, or with it. When you turn this, I believe it's this way, you can collapse the handle. You do that so I can put a little bit more of that penetrating oil in here. Again, turn it and it collapses. It'll look better on the reel when we do it, but it's a one-touch crank. You'll notice that I put the screw right back into the handle so that I don't lose that. And, well, we're going to get going. So a lot of folks wonder what happened with Ryobi. They're a power tool manufacturer now, as I kind of alluded to. I think they probably have always been. This reel's made in Japan, and it had a pretty robust U.S. market until it decided to exit sales in the U.S., and it sold its line to Berkley. And Berkley is the bait company that you know about, you know, the power baits and all. And it's part of Pure Fishing, but back in the 1990s it was looking for reels to make rod and reel combinations out of, and there was enough reels that were marketed under the Berkley brand. And Ryobi sold U.S. distribution to Berkley, and then they exited U.S. The reels continued to be available on the international market, just not sold here. And I think the one that, if I recall correctly, was called FinTech, was probably the next iteration of this after Sliver Cloud. But at any rate, it's a very solid reel. I believe it was made in the 80s. It's a metal jacketed reel. And, well, we're going to get underneath that, show you how it was made. A lot of people compare the silver reels of the Japanese era. So you had the Ryobi, you had the Daiwa 5000, 7000, 2600 C series, and you had the Penn C series, or 100 to 105. And this one's kind of a mix. It doesn't share any of the technologies. It was a different manufacturer. But like I said, it was built to last, and, well, just evidence of that. It's probably 50 years old right now, 40 or 50 years old, and it's still going. Except this one just tells me that it hasn't been used in a while. It was sitting in the bin, probably because somebody didn't know that if you simply spray it with penetrating oil, you can restore the bail function. And inside, it's probably got a mess of dried grease, or at least that's what I'm hoping is kind of sluggish, making this go that way. So we'll see. Here's your third screw. When I take my pieces and parts off, they all go into a parts tray. That way I know where to find them when it's time to reinstall. And as many of you are probably noticing, I do wear a protective glove to keep most of the greases and that off. All right, let's remove it. Yep, there you go. Just a whole bunch of dried grease, which tells you it hasn't been serviced in a while. One of the things I didn't tell you, but maybe some of you have noted, is that I set the anti-reverse dog, this little lever here, off, so that when I remove it and when I install it, I don't have to worry about where that lands on the main gear, which also has the click ratchet in it. Well, that penetrating oil is kind of becoming the jack of all trades, isn't it? We've just, we used it to loosen up the bail. Now we're using it to loosen up the old greases on the case. And the one thing I don't use it for is lubrication. If you read the side plate on a penetrating oil, it'll tell you all kinds of things. Clean, degrease, so on. But one of the things that it says is lubricate. And I probably have mentioned it before. I think the only thing I've ever put it on to lubricate is a bicycle chain. And I don't even know if that was a good idea, because, well, when I took the bicycle out, it got all kinds of dirt and that greasing kind of spooled into the chains. So there you go. All right, well, we've cleaned that up nicely. You'll notice that the case has a little shim washer on it that always goes between the main gear. You can pull that off. We'll get under there. And the bushing, the case is actually acting as a bushing. There is no bushing there. I'm just going to leave that shim washer right on the case. Put the case into my container, and let's move on then. We have an arm assembly here. This is not unusual for these types of reels. These reels were probably in the moderately priced range. They weren't the most expensive, but they weren't the least expensive either. Pull that pin out. That pin is going to hold your cross-wind arm to the axle shaft. And once that's done, pull the axle shaft out. And that may be an issue. Yep, it's just, well, it's grease choked. It's, I don't know if Webster has that in the dictionary yet, but it's in my common usage because, well, there's a lot of old reels that I work on that are choked with grease and can't function properly. What I like to do is what I just did there. Take some 4/0 steel wool. That's very fine steel wool. Kind of work it there. Then check. Test with your hand. Make sure it's nice and smooth and not pitted. Here's your click ratchet. That's going to make a noise when your spool spins in reverse. And you'll have one or two of these little washers that sit on top of that. And that's to control the line height and wrapping on the spool. And well, this one looks like it's doing fine. It looks like it's wrapped evenly, so it has the right amount of washers. This is a plastic spool. If you look at how manufacturers save $1 or a penny, it's usually by substituting some materials, and one of the materials they substitute is what makes up the spool. Well, you can see this story about the dried grease continues. I'm going to use a little screwdriver here to try and pick that off. And we're going to just do a lot of this. A lot of your reel repair is not really repair. It's service, it's cleaning, it's identifying if there are any broken parts and replacing them. And yeah, every now and then you need to do some kind of a bush fix if the parts aren't available. But the repair oftentimes is just something that's common. Maybe a drag washer or something that's been worn, something consumable. And most of the time I'll tell you to take a picture here so that you know the orientation of the arm. But in this case, there's only one way to install it with that bracket on the back. Let's go over and take the main gear out next. Again, that should just be sitting in a bushing on the other side. And I guess it's been sitting there for a long time because it's kind of telling me it wants to stay home and nested. Which tells you that using that side case as a bushing, not a bad idea if it's properly machined. I mean, that was a nice tight fitting one. And you'll see our story here of the dried greases. Doing fine, thank you very much. All right, just going to grab a little bit of this, work that around, and then I like to take a brush. Right now I seem to be currently stuck on this brass brush. You can use a toothbrush, you can use a metal, steel, wire brush, or anything in between, and get the results. What you want to do, make sure that the cavities on the main gear are clear. Check the ridges of the teeth, make sure they're good. Check it from this side, make sure that they're all evenly worn. And on the back here we have just that click ratchet, and that's where your anti-reverse dog setup is going to go. Alright, well, kind of getting down to the end of it, you can see it's a relatively simple reel. Nothing wrong with simple. And we'll just do a little bit more cleaning here. So while I'm doing that, I encourage questions. Maybe you want to know a little bit more about the Japanese reels of the time. Maybe you have a question regarding a particular setup in the reel. Maybe you're working on something and you just can't figure it out. Sometimes I can answer those, sometimes I can't. I've been going back and forth with a fellow who's got a casting reel that's just making some noise when he tries to break from casting. And, you know, without seeing the reel, it's very hard to figure it out, but you can. You're going to need a socket to remove the rotor assembly. That's because the dish is too deep to reach it with a standard open wrench. It's a Mitchell tool. You don't need the Mitchell tool. You just need a socket. Up here, well, we really took this off for two things. One, we know we were having a little struggle here with this belt click. I can see a little bit why. There's some old grease that has kind of caught itself in there. And then there's a lot of old grease in here. So let's just do the same thing. I don't like to use an abrasive for cleaning greases if I don't have to. Now sometimes it's just on there and it literally has to be chiseled off, at which point maybe I'll use the flat blade of a screwdriver or something. But right now, if I can get away with just using a cotton swab and a paper towel, well, those are my tools of choice for that. And I'm noticing as I go around the rim here, there is some kind of accumulation of this old grease, so I think that's probably one of the things that's caused that bail to trip a little bit unevenly. And what we'll do here, we're going to take the grease, or oil rather, and we're going to flood that area, just like we did up top there, just to make sure it turns nice and easy, which it does. Alright, there shouldn't be a bearing up here, but I don't know, so why not take it off, right? You're this far into the reel. Before I go too much further, I don't want to lose that rotor nut. And normally I'd put that into my parts tray, but I know right away I'm 2 screws and a short cleaning from putting it all back together again, so I don't mind just laying that on my table there. And I'm just noticing as I push that down, I can probably just remove that pinion gear right from the inside there. That's okay. We're just going to confirm that this is a bushing anyway. Well, this is a bushing. You can see it here. You don't have to fight her to bring it out. I got the gear out. Flood it. Wipe it down. Now, if that was a bearing, I'd certainly want to get it out of there, but this is a brass bushing. And if I wanted to get it out, there's a little crack right here on where that seats. We could certainly do that. We're not going to, but we could if we needed to move that out. But since the pinion gear, which is the one that we want to clean up, is the important one here, let's go do that. Before I do that, I want to clear my table of these two. I don't want to lose that again. So we'll go put those right back in. And people ask me from time to time, can you hot rod a reel like this? You certainly can. You can take that pinion gear bushing out and you can put a bearing in. That's the only one that's going to work on this. The other two sides are built into the case. Now, if you had the plastic bushings that are more common on later reels, then you could certainly replace those as well. You need to know the measurements on those. You need to know how to measure a bearing. I did a video on one of those showing you. You need inside diameter, outside diameter, and height. And if you measure them, you can generally find replacements for those. But again, this wasn't the top end type of technology, so they made some compromises. One of those was the casing. And here we have a reel that just doesn't have any bearings in it. But you know what? Sometimes bearings are overrated. This reel works fine without them. It doesn't work fine when the grease that's in the reel is probably a decade or more old, but that's not anything to do with the bushings. As a matter of fact, probably good buying a reel this age. It's been sitting around a while. You got a lot of reel life left in the reel. I noticed that there's just one little more piece of some dried grease up here where we took the bushing out. That was a good time to get that out. Bushing, I said bushing, pinion gear out. And then take that pinion gear, put it right back in. It'll sit nicely. Go ahead and take your rotor then, put that on. And then take the rotor nut that came off in a traditional counterclockwise manner. For those of you that don't know counterclockwise, that means you're turning the nut towards you. And it goes back in a clockwise manner, which means turn it away from you. And one more paper towel should do this. Clean the inside of the bowl. And we're ready for reassembly. We have our main gear goes next. And main assembly is basically just putting it back the way you found it in opposite sequence. So it's the old last will be first and first will be last kind of thing. All right, we'll put the grease on that. The grease where it's going to go into the case on the other side. Grease where it's going to go into the case on this side. I probably should have held off on that because I'm going to put the shim washer on. It'll probably compress all of that down. All right, I just noticed one more little piece. Every time you look around, you think you got all the grease and you don't. There's one more little pile of grease there hiding behind that anti-reverse override. We're going to take our main gear then, put that in. We're going to make sure it merges with the pinion gear. Next up then, we're going to grab the axle shaft. Just a very light coating of grease on this now. And I'm sure this is going in a whole lot easier than it came out. Just going to start it. Now I want to grab the crosswind block arm. We're going to put a little bit of grease onto that eccentric. You'll notice that the eccentric is offset. That's why when you're going to go, it's going to move up and down, and that's what's going to move the axle shaft up and down. And before we go put that pin in, go ahead and put a little bit of grease into the channel where that pin is going to ride as well. Go ahead and line that up. And I mentioned there's a shim washer that goes on, so make sure you put that shim washer on. And you're going to notice that that shim washer overlays the ridge of that crosswind arm. So that kind of holds it tight and in place before you put the case on. Now I can go ahead and put some more of the grease onto the stud there. I'm going to bring the axle shaft down, and when we bring the axle shaft down, we want to make sure that we can see the hole so that we can align the pin with the hole. Bring your pin in, find the hole. Kind of a visual sighting here. And then make sure it gets into the back of this and into that carrier slot. So you're doing a couple of different things here. And one of the things that happened as a result was that little shim washer got behind it. That's okay, we'll just put it in front of it. There you go. That's it. Now if you want, you can test it right now to make sure everything is working fine. It certainly is. And if you like, just one more little coat of grease kind of on the top here. That's all you need. You do not grease these teeth. That's where this ratchet is going to go. So So let's grab our top case then. I'm going to put that in. There's a paddle on the bottom here. This side should be flat, and what you're doing is you're kind of eyeballing to get that paddle in place as you set it. And then you'll know you have it set when you have nice tight seams there without any kind of friction. All right, we'll take our 3 side plate screws then, put those back in. So this reel can go on and on and on because, well, what's the key here? Well, there's very little pieces that are going to break because the pieces that are made very well of substantial materials, and they're not going to rust up or anything. For example, if you had the same reel with ball bearings in it and you left it in storage and those bearings dried out, they probably rusted because they probably weren't stainless, or they clogged, or some other issue happened with them, and you wouldn't be able to save that reel without replacing a whole bunch of bearings. In this case, there aren't any bearings. The cases are acting as the bushings, and well, you know what? Seems to be doing good to me. All right, one more of these. And then this up top here, I believe, has Teflon washers in it, and I always have a hard time with this one because it doesn't have the clip. So we may or may not service the spool as a last resort. This was hard coming out, so what I'm going to do here is just put a little coating of oil on there so that when it goes in, it kind of slides in a little bit better. Set this up for a left-hand retrieve. This can go on either side. Put the screw in on this side. Somebody asked me where you can get a screw like this. Well, you probably can't. Not anymore, at least not from Ryobi. What you can do, however, is go to a local hardware store that carries metric threaded screws and match up. You may find one that has a smaller head and you can put a washer in underneath it, something like that. You can always find something close to make it work. All right, we're just about done now. We are done. We're nice and tight. And this is what I was referring to with the collapsible handle. If you turn that, you can collapse the handle for storage, and then it will spring back. Turn it, collapse it, spring it back. Nice little feature. I'm just going to take a quick look at this. As I mentioned, they're always kind of hard for me to get these out, because it's got a little kind of a seal to it. I would just like to see what we have in here. We have a hard washer. Yeah, we don't have to do anything with this stack, so I recommend that you don't. But that's it. It's got a little window kind of a thing. You can pull them in and out. In this case, those are clean inside. I'm not thinking that there's any issue with it there. And what I need to do now is just figure out how to get this thing back in, because, well, it's always a problem with me. And then I think if I just grab a small screwdriver blade here, holding that side down, is sort of like putting a bicycle chain on. You just kind of push in and turn. There you go. And if you turn it, eventually you will seat it back again. Let's put that back on. It's nice and clean underneath. This is the click ratchet that's going to, or clicker, that's going to hit with that and make it sound like a little click, click, click when it's time to hear it, like there. That's telling you that the reel is spinning backwards and that a fish or something else is taking the line out of it. One more little thing here, a little cleanup on this button. I'm going to use a rod and reel cleaner for that. The reel case itself is in nice condition. Nothing really needs to be done with that. And I'll tell you what, put this on a 9 or a 10-foot pole, take this out in the surf. You're going to find that it spins nice and easy. And as I mentioned, dependable is the word here. Overbuilt, probably like the Ryobi tools. And it's just going to keep fishing. All right, tighten that down. Make sure your drags hold, and then back your drag off. Let's give it a ride. Oh, look at this, right? So it came from a point where you could hardly turn the thing to a champ, just like that. And I would challenge anybody to pick this reel up and tell me how many ball bearings are in it. The answer won't be 0. All right, let's make sure that the bad trip's right on schedule, doing what it should be doing, nice and firm and easy. That's it. That's your Ryobi Sliver Cloud. It's the SX4N, made in Japan, late 70s, early 80s, metal-bodied reel. Wow, for a flea market find, if you will. If you can find them, go for it. They're very durable reels that will last a long time into the future. But I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. And if you want to see more, again, I ask you to please subscribe. To all of our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. Your efforts are appreciated. To everyone, I wish you the best of fishing. Now's the time to tune up your reels. The spring season's coming at us, so make sure that you're ready to go. Get those reels serviced now so you don't miss the first run. And have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.